What's going on, football fans? Welcome back to another episode of Breaking the Birds here. A little bit of a different episode. We're not going to be diving into detail on film on somebody here, but we're going to be looking at like a little bit of a preview here on before the start of free agency. Free agency kicks off next week. That's where we'll be seeing a lot of former Eagles players find new homes. And unfortunately, that's going to be the reality of it. Whenever a team goes to the Super Bowl, it's going to be a lot of guys here who have momentum of being able to cash in on big contracts. They should go out there. They should see what they can get. Overall thought about that, we'll see, because I think the Eagles' free agency class is pretty interesting in the way that other teams look at it, whether they value them as highly as we think in terms of what they could get paid. How the defensive backs viewed in terms of a team that just got so many sacks on the defensive line, and basically how the linebackers are viewed in that regard as well. And of course, that goes to the secondary, and the linebackers were basically almost all of them going to be replaced except for Darius Slay in the starting end. But to begin with here, let's take a look at the cap space that we're looking at right here. So as we're speaking now, per over the cap, Eagles are at $4.1 million in cap space. Now, they just restructured Jake Elliott today, which is going to save them just around $2.5 million as well. So we're looking at right now a solid $6.6 million in cap space. Now, there are a couple of ways that the Eagles can restructure their way out of getting more cap space. And what we're looking at they can extend and they can restructure, both in terms of Darius Slay and Lane Johnson. Now, Darius Slay, as we know, he's getting up there. He's 32 in age now. He's on a contract for another 2 years, I believe, whereas the next season here is more manageable. Or not manageable in terms of letting him go, trade, cut, all that does not make sense with where he is at right now. There is like 22.5 dead money if he is cut. In terms of trade, there is also, I think that will be the same if it's post June 1 trade. It's 8.6 million dead cap for the Eagles. It just doesn't make sense for Darius Slay, and considering he's almost the only guy on the defensive end right now, or the defensive backfield that is returning, don't see him going anywhere. They can save $13 million by restructuring his contract, upwards of $13 million. The same with Lane Johnson. Now, we know Lane Johnson has been looming at retirement for some time. He is under contract through 2025. I think he's going to play out that contract, and then he's not going to be playing anymore after that. The rest of the years in his contract are all void years. He doesn't have any guaranteed salary there, so if he calls it a career at that point, if he doesn't want to be doing it anymore, we know how much pain he's been playing through, ankle injury, all this kind of thing. If he doesn't want to call anymore there, that will make sense. But it's just to round out that, restructure would make the most sense. So what are we basically doing is we're backloading the contract. We're pushing money down the road, creating void years to save more now, which makes sense considering the cap space is going up, and there's going to be more flexibility moving forward. So that could end up creating around $10.5 million for Lane Johnson, upwards of $13 million for Darius Slay. Quick math put together there, we're looking at around $23.5 million. Put that on the 6.6, and we're etching close to that $30 million in cap space. There's some smaller moves here and there that can be made. For example, if we're taking a look at Jalen Hurts extension, they can actually save $2.6 million by extending him. They're going to be, how that contract is going to be loaded is going to be super interesting. Whether they want to front load it to make it more manageable as we're moving down the line, or back load it as they usually do, and how he likes to do with these type of contracts right here. But those are the big potential moves that could be made here on the back end of it. So it's pretty safe to say that Eagles can absolutely be buyers in the free agency market. But also, what is important to realize is when we're looking at this many players that could be signed to big contracts elsewhere, Johnson, Gardner-Johnson, Bradbury, Somalu, Hargrave, even TJ Edwards is probably going to get a sizable contract elsewhere. It's important to keep note of comp picks. So comp picks basically are going to be measured by what the value of the deal is relative to the position that they're playing and how many snaps they've played for the former and new team. So Eagles could very likely be looking at 3rd to 4th round picks. 4 is the maximum. And of course, if you get a high value contract, let's say Johnson Gunnar Johnson gets paid like a top 5 safety, we're looking at a 3rd round pick, a compensatory. The same with Javon Hargrave. Somalu could make upwards of that relative to his position. That could get up in that 3rd and 4th range. So Eagles can make moves that don't count towards the comp pick. So if Eagles were to sign a bunch of free agents from other teams, that would nullify the guys that they're losing because they're adding guys instead. What they can do is that players that get released off of other teams, say Cedarius Smith gets released from the Vikings, for example. That report came out yesterday. A guy like John Johnson, the safety, who was released by the Browns. That's a guy that you could sign off the street that wouldn't count towards the comp pick formula. A bunch of those moves, especially with trades as well. Eagles have, if they do get four compensatory picks in the 3rd and 4th range, they're going to have 9 picks in the first 4 rounds next year. So there's some ammo to move around this year. If you make trades for players, that doesn't count towards the comp pick formula. So Eagles will absolutely be active and may even end up signing they have cap flexibility to sign a big free agent if they want to. So going by position, let's start with the defense here. Take a look at the defensive line first. We're going to be staring at, let's see here first. Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph. We didn't have to go through those guys. They were stopgap players. Jordan Davis got a high ankle sprain. He got moved to injury reserve. They needed some guys to come in and replace him. They signed Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. These guys are not coming back. So Javon Hargrave, that's the big one. So 30 years old, he is. He is going to be looking at a massive contract. The league always craves pass rushing defensive tackles, but basically just to pass rush wherever you can get it. And defensive tackle is, of course, one of those big spots because you don't necessarily find that anywhere else in the league. There's only a select few guys that can really consistently generate pressure. And coming off a double-digit sack season, 11 sacks, career high for him. Last year, 2021, he got 7.5 sacks. That was the second most he got in his career. Of course, he's coming off a high here. 18 QB hits in 2021, 16 QB hits in 2022. And, I mean, he's just been playing really good football. What you're doing with him is that you're kind of projecting that you're going to get the same player that you were before. He's 30 years old. He was in a very defensive tackle friendly system here with a nose tackle, so more lined up in those 3 and 5 techs where he can get those isolation one-on-one blocks, and basically just a really good group here. So his value, according to SpotTrack and PFF, is going to be looking around that 17.5 to even upwards of $20 million per year. I don't think it's going to get upwards to that $20 million. I think we're more looking at more toward 15 per year than 20, but it's going to be looking in that area. But again, one of those guys where you go, how much a team's going to be paying a 30-year-old defensive tackle? Can Eagles re-sign him back? Sure, they can if they want to, but also then you're investing so much of your cap space in 30-year-old defensive tackle. And it's one of those positions where it wouldn't surprise me. Eagles love the defensive line, but also you could look elsewhere in free agency and spend less and also get a veteran presence in there while you're transitioning over to a younger defensive line. Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, perhaps a draft pick coming in here. We know they like to go defensive line early in the draft. There are a bunch of guys in this draft that are available to solidify the defensive interior. I do believe they're going to bring in some veteran presence here through free agency. They only have 2 guys basically on contract here. I guess you can put in Maul and Tuipulotu as well. But other than that, you have Jordan Davis and Milton Williams. So, Javon Hargrave is going to get paid big time. I would not be surprised if he is a priority for the Eagles to sign, but also it would make sense to let him go, get the comp pick, and then look elsewhere and get younger on the defensive line. And getting younger on the defensive line leads me to the next guy, Fletcher Cox. So Fletcher Cox, the guy who just kept coming back. He's 32 years old now. He obviously had a significant dip in production. He is no longer the dominant guy on the defensive line anymore. He is a solid rotational defensive tackle. He can still get in there and rush the passer. He got shoved a lot last season. I mean, double teams, the same goes with Javon Hargrave. I think it went more for Fletcher Cox. Like, they were removed off of the line. That's not a good look when you're running a 5-man front most of the time. You want to be able to sustain in there and open up some of the lane for the linebacker who is in there, who wasn't TJ Edwards. He had a rough job with a Fletcher Cox and a Javon Hargrave, who kind of took a dip in production also in terms of taking on the run. Fletcher Cox, also a guy that I could see coming back if it is on a very team-friendly contract. But Fletcher Cox is, by the name, going to be looking at around $5 to $7.5 million on a one-year deal anywhere he goes. I mean, he has a name it's a reputation out there in the league. I would not be surprised at all if a team went out to get him. Looking elsewhere on the defensive interior here in the free agent market, Deron Payne got tagged by Washington, and that really leads Javon Hargrave as that sole guy at the top. Dalvin Tomlinson, also 29 years old, he's going to get paid elsewhere. But if you were to sign we know Eagles, like I said multiple times now, they want to invest in the defensive line. We know this, and we know that Desai is of the same nature as a Vic Fangio. So he's going to be running out there with nose tackle and a 5-man, this 3-4 defense. We're going to have defensive ends playing the 3 and the 5 technique a lot of the time. So if you're going to get out here in free agency and pay someone, why not go a little bit younger and find the new Javon Hargrave as to when you signed Javon Hargrave back 3 years ago. So there's a couple names in here. Draymond Jones from Denver. A guy who has absolutely a really good first step. He's got a lot of pass rush ability, and he's a guy who's got a ton of pass rush production from the interior. 14.5 pass rush win rate, 11th best since 2019. Zach Allen, also guy off the Cardinals, 25.5 years old. Definitely a guy that you can bring in here. He's got good size. He's got strength. He's a speedy guy as well. Looking elsewhere in terms of a free agent, a veteran presence that you could bring in here. David Onyemata from New Orleans, a guy who had a very much of a down year in 2022, but was really good in 2020 and 2021. He's 30 years old as well. Same there with Javon Hargrave, but he's going to be much more affordable. Matt Ioannidis, if you're going to bring in a guy who's really good stout against the run, he's 29 years old, a guy that could be that veteran presence as cheaper option as you kind of transferring into more of the youth on the interior of the D-line. Moving to the defensive end position, we have 2 free agents here. Starting off with Robert Quinn, that is easy. He's 33 years old. He didn't do really anything while he was with the Eagles. I think it's very safe to say that he's going to go. He does have some experience under the on Bears defense with Desai, where he really brought out a lot in him while he was there with the Bears, but I don't think they're going to be paying Robert Quinn to come back. I mean, he didn't have it anymore, really. Didn't make anything of the snaps that he got in the Eagles defense, so I would say Robert Quinn is a go. Brandon Graham, though, already been reported out there or rumored out there that he's in talks with the Eagles and coming back. 2-year deal would make a ton of sense. 2-year, $10 million, $5 million per year with about 8 guaranteed would make a ton of sense. Finishing his career, he said he wants to play 2 more years, so he has 15 in total, and he definitely wants all of them to be with Philadelphia. He was such a productive player as a rotational defensive end or edge rusher last season. He can play inside as well. He can bring some versatility on the defensive line. He's a guy they have to bring back. I definitely think he's going to stay, and that will be a very manageable contract. Looking elsewhere on the edge defenders, it's not the greatest of class here. I mean, there are a bunch of names in here that you could throw in for like 1-year deals if you had to, like a Melvin Ingram. He's up there in age. Leonard Floyd, 30 years old. Yannick Ngakoue, who for some reason keeps traveling from team to team. Wasn't really impressed with him when Eagles played against the Colts this season here. I think he was totally shut down. Didn't really provide any pass rush movability at all. Justin Houston, 34 years old. Frank Clark, 30 years old. Like a bunch of guys that could come in here on 1-year deals later throughout the like towards the end of free agency. I mentioned Sedarius Smith, a guy that I think is a really good pass rusher. He's requested a release off the Packers. Like I said, with the comp pick formula, that's a guy who is really interesting to keep an eye on. Towards that, like after the draft, that portion of free agency, if he lasts to that part. But really no big names in the edge market, which could drive the price into more of a 1-year contract thing here for the defensive ends, which is basically what the Eagles been needing. They have the youth in Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick. Moving on here, we'll get to the DBs. Let's start with James Bradbury, who had a phenomenal season, was top 10 in targets by any cornerback in the NFL, or any DB in the NFL for that matter, and was allowing the lowest passer rating when targeted among really anyone. So he had a phenomenal season here with the Eagles. And like I said before, how much of that is a product of him, how much is a product of the pass rush getting there, that would pretty much reflect what the contract is going to be looking like. But that being said, he's up there. He's 29 and a half years old now, but he's going to cash in. This is his last contract that he can get in there. I think he's looking at around 12 to 14, 15 million. Bradbury is probably a guy the Eagles are going to be looking at and monitoring here what his market is going to look like. I think it could be lower than some anticipate, simply by the fact that he wasn't really a shutdown player with the Giants. How much was a product of the Eagles' defensive line being really good and putting him in a position to succeed. You have the rough Super Bowl in there as well. Just, the recency bias, we know that's a thing in the NFL. So he's probably going to get paid because top cornerbacks are always going to get paid in the NFL. And there are no real other, like Jamel Dean is probably the only guy in the free agency class who's really up there as well, just simply because he's young and has been very productive and consistent in his time in the NFL here. So he's probably going to be looking at that 15 to 20 mil range. But other than that, no real options to take that contract and kind of like set the market there and drive down the price on James Bradbury. But I think he's gone. I don't think he's going to be coming back for the Eagles here, and that leaves Darius Slay and a bunch of guys here on the defensive back end where you wonder, can any of these guys actually take a step up and become those next level guys here? Naturally, we're talking about Josh Joby. We're talking about Josiah Scott. Is that going to be the guy? Seth McPherson, is he ready to take over a starting role? Obviously, then comes the draft as well. And how much in the draft are they going to be looking at defense, and especially defensive line, where we know they like to invest. So I think that there's a chance Eagles go out there and sign a younger cornerback who will absolutely be starting. I'm looking at a guy like Byron Murphy from Arizona. He's not going to be too expensive, like over the top expensive. Not like he's been shattering anything, any records or anything like when he's been with the Cardinals. But he's a top class athlete. Like he is so movable. He's played a ton of snaps with the Cardinals. He's going to be looking at a very manageable contract. We're looking at that $10 million per range. He will absolutely be a starter, but it doesn't rule out that you can be drafting a Devon Witherspoon, a Christian Gonzalez at 10 if one of those guys were to slip there. And with Darius Slay naturally also coming towards the end of his tenure with the Eagles, like we talked before, it would make sense that he has 2 more years. I could see them go out and getting a guy like Byron Murphy. Other than him, there are a bunch of stopgap veterans that I would absolutely expect him to sign one of them on a 1-year deal if it went to it. Shaq Griffin off of the Jaguars got released. He's going to be looking to a 1-year prove-it deal, and a guy that, again, an athletic guy that you could bring in on one of those 1-year deals here. Other than that, not really loving the free agent class here with the cornerbacks. And Marcus Peters, do you want to bring him in? Like, he's getting up there, 30 years old as well. That would be a stopgap thing. And the question is, do you want to be more relying on some of the younger backup guys you've had for a couple of years now and to groom? And it would say a lot about a guy like Seth McPherson, for example, if they don't. Like, he's going to be a special teams player if he's not only in his career, if he's not going to be taking the opportunity to get the chance to start now. Other than that, let's move to safety. Eagles have naturally the big name, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who played safety at Florida and then had the 1 year at safety here with the Eagles. And the question then becomes, did he have good enough of a season where do you pay him in the safety market? Like, do you pay him top 5 safety money, which goes up to that Derwin James upwards of $19 million per year? Are we looking more that just outside the top 5 safety range, where he's looking at that 13, 14 million per year, which is also a lot? I think that CJ should be trying to cash as much as possible after the season that he's had here, tying the league in interceptions and really just proving that he can play in a lot of different ways here in the defense. He's a good box defender, so he can play the slot, he can play safety. So I 100% get that he wants to cash in on that. We'll see. I mean, he's 24, so he is definitely the type of guy that if you were to invest in somebody, you can project him becoming better and better. That's the thing about him. Excuse me, he's 25. You can look at his tape and think this guy's going to get better, and we want to bank on that. I wouldn't rule it out. I know that he posted the video that emotional video, and that he's kind of leaving and all this. I wouldn't rule it out. Definitely not. But I believe that he will be testing out free agency, and then we'll see if his market isn't as strong as he thinks, or he wanted it to be, or expected it to be. Then the Eagles come in there and could sign him back. Marcus Epps, a guy who reportedly has a market, and for some reason, a lot of teams interested. That's been the early report. We'll see how much of that is agent talk. If there's an actual market for him and teams are going to be really interested and start bidding, Eagles are not going to get into a bidding war over Marcus Epps. He's been serviceable when he's been playing here, but if you're talking about a guy who benefited from a great team around him, Epps will be the guy. He's fine. He's a decent player. Like he's solid. He can start, but you're not going to be expecting anything massive from him. And more often than not, he was more of a liability in the defensive back end than he was a strong suit. I would not anticipate Marcus Epps coming back. I think they're going to be looking elsewhere. I think Reed Blankenship, who is a really cheap player, is one that could, if nothing else, and if nobody else were to be brought back, of course they're going to be bringing in somebody here at the safety position. He is a guy that could step in there and play. A couple other guys to look out for there in the free agency market. Adrian Amos, a guy who had familiarity with Desai. Another guy who had some familiarity out there is Tashawn Gibson. Both of whom, both Amos and Gibson, have relation with Sean Desai when he was there, when he was the DB coach for the Chicago Bears. So both of those guys would make a lot of sense. Nick Scott, also a guy out of the Rams, a really, really good special teams player, could be a solid addition. Like I said, John Johnson, he's going to be looking at a 1-year contract to really prove himself. Had a hell of a year in 2020 before he was signed to the Browns. 28 years old, is going to be looking for a 1-year deal to kind of solidify his status and end up with one more payday in his career, and that could be with the Eagles. All right, finishing off the defense here, we got the linebackers. Eagles set to lose both Kaiser White and T.J. Edwards in free agency, and one of them is going to be coming back. I have that feeling. I don't think they're going to be rolling out the Kobe Dean and then nobody else. The guys they have behind it will be Sean Bradley. It would be Davion Taylor, who didn't even make the team, really. Then they have Christian Ellis. And I know they like Christian Ellis, but they're not going to be starting Christian Ellis. I just can't imagine that. I think either Kaiser White or T.J. Edwards is going to be coming back. And this is where it gets a little bit, where I get a little bit, tinfoil hat, maybe. Like, we know Eagles don't pay linebackers. They don't like to pay linebackers. They don't like to prioritize drafting linebackers with premium picks. The fact they even selected Davion Taylor and Nakobe Dean with third-round picks, two totally different players, by the way, is bonkers. But considering the defense, the style of defense they played last season, where they multiple times had 5 guys at the line and then 1 linebacker in there, and then everybody else DBs. So basically, only the linebacker playing every single run responsibility and variation in terms of wings, of fullbacks, lead blockers, basically, and pullers, reacting to pullers when the defensive line is just basically one gapping in there. You only have one guy responsible for doing that. Sean Desai is basically rocking the same type of defense. It is really, really rough playing linebacker in those conditions because you have to read everything and you have to be super smooth. You can't waste a step being that primary Mike linebacker in that type of defense. So that is why I believe TJ Edwards, the undrafted free agent who was signed from Wisconsin, who has played 4 years with the Eagles, progressed each and every single season, and worked his way through the ranks, signed a 1-year deal in the middle of the 2021 season to stay through 2022 when he couldn't have gotten a longer contract by then. I think he's going to get an offer from the Eagles, and I think he's going to take it. And I don't know anything. I don't have any inside info by TJ. He wouldn't give it to me, unfortunately. He has been progressing into a top 10 linebacker in 2021 and 2022. He could have cashed in last year if that's what he wanted to. I think the Eagles are going to give him a pretty good deal here to stay with the Eagles. If not, there are some really good options out there. Bobby Wagner is probably going to be looking at a 1-year deal with contender. Eagles are contenders. They have one of the best offenses in the NFL. Him and Nakobe Dean would be really, really fun. And Bobby probably not going to be too expensive. We're probably going to be looking at a $7 or $8 million 1-year deal for him. We also have a Eric Kendricks, who just got released from the Vikings, a speedy linebacker who can play in there. Kaisi White signed a 1-year deal to up his market value. I don't know if he did it. I don't know if he's actually worth more than he was when the Eagles signed him last offseason. I think he was very up and down. I would never ever want him to be that one linebacker in a 5-man front, and Eagles didn't. Also, they always had TJ Edwards in on those situations. He was inconsistent in reading the run game. He made plays. He made some splash plays here and there, but really nothing that I think that they'll be willing to pay a lot for moving forward. We'll see what his market is. Maybe he'll be coming back on a cheap deal at some point. But yeah, other than that, Nicholas Morrow, a tackling machine. Cody Barton, also a guy who has a ton he has experience with Sean Desai being the starting middle linebacker for the Seahawks while last season when Sean was there. But other than that, like Alex Singleton is a free agent. I don't think Eagles are going to be bringing back him. Would surprise me at least. So they're not going to be investing in linebacker unless it's a guy like TJ Edwards, I believe. We'll see what TJ's market is actually going to be. There's going to be a lot of teams who want him. I really think that Gannon would love to have him in Arizona as well, but we'll see. Moving to the offensive side of the ball, Eagles have at least one really big free agent here, and obviously that's Isaac Somalu. Now, Isaac, 29 years old, hasn't really had that massive payday. He's going to get it. Nobody ever wants to shut up about Isaac Somalu, whether it be his teammates, coaches, other guys around the league. He is so well thought of. He has a super high football IQ. The versatility is bonkers. He can play guard, center, right tackle. Probably the only thing he can play is left tackle. But even then, like if he was to be shoved in there left tackle, probably a team wouldn't be too worried about it. Isaac is going to get paid, and he should get paid somewhere. Eagles have a plan for it. They have some guys they can throw in that guard. I don't think they're even going to be competing for that. So hell of a ride with Isaac Somalu. Really hope he gets paid somewhere. Moving on, running back. The obvious one. We have Boston Scott, and we have obviously Miles Sanders. Now, Miles Sanders, after we had Josh Jacobs get tagged, we had Saquon Barkley get tagged. And so what was this crazy also Tony Pollard got tagged. So this crazy running back class, which is still super bonkers. Miles Sanders is looking more to be a top of that class here with David Montgomery and Devin Singletary. I'll presume. So if Miles Sanders has any way of market, Eagles are not going to be in it. Simply, they're not going to be paying Miles Sanders multiple million on a multiple year contract. Like if they're looking anywhere from 5+, forget about it. I really don't see that happening whatsoever. And I would be surprised if they did. Super Bowl was atrocious for Miles Sanders, and really the drop-off between a Boston Scott, a Kenny Gainwell, and Miles Sanders hasn't been that big. It just hasn't. He's not a very good pass protector. His pass catching ability was out the window throughout his years. He started out so well with Carson Wentz in the passing game, and then it's just been nowhere. Whenever he's gotten the ball in his flat in the flat on checkdowns, he's not been able to make guys miss. So, not seeing Miles Sanders coming back here in any way, shape, or form. Boston Scott, if he wants to come back here, I could see that happening. He's a guy who can make things happen on his own. He can make guys miss. He's a giant killer. We know that. It's like I have a soft spot for a guy like Boston Scott, and I think he has good value. And if he wants to come back, and the Eagles do bring back, I would not be anyway mad about it. But the guys out there, Samaje Perine, Raheem Mostert, he was incredible with the 49ers. Alexander Matterson, not even 25 years old yet, always just seemed to be a really good rotational guy in there for the Vikings. Rashard Penny could not stay healthy. I don't know about that. I would like a guy who's a little bit more healthy. Jeff Wilson, he's been around again. Health issue. Jerick McKinnon, we know a lot about him from the Super Bowl here. He's an effective guy. Kareem Hunt, how many times has he been projected to be traded to the Eagles? But the guy that I'm looking at here, Damian Harris, one of my favorite runners, runs violent, really good pass protector. He has been a superb running back in 2021 and 2020. Had a little bit cut short here in 2022. Wasn't utilized nearly as much as he was in prior years. If you could come in here in that rotational role, that would be super perfect. Add in a draft a running back there as well, and you have a room consisting of Kenny Gainwell, a Damian Harris, and a running back. Man, it would not require that much running from Jalen Hurts, and it could just be it. Like the offense would be so incredibly unstoppable. All right, so capping off here with wide receivers, Eagles only have Zach Pascal as a free agent. Now, I think Zach Pascal is very serviceable. I think he didn't make a lot of mistakes whenever he was in there on the offense. I think he did a pretty good job. Nothing spectacular. That's what you want out of your wide receiver for. They could be looking to upgrade either through trade or, probably through trade to get a guy like Quez Watkins replaced by somebody who doesn't drop the ball in the Super Bowl and who doesn't fumble a deep pass against Washington or basically doesn't catch a ball right open over the middle against the Cowboys. And all losses throughout the year. It's been a tough season for Quez Watkins. A couple guys that I'm looking at here in the free agent market. It's not like the wide receiver market is not really that good. There's going to be some guys going to get disgustingly overpaid. Like Jacoby Myers going to be looking at maybe 16+. It's unbelievable. Don't even want to get into a guy like OBJ. Juju, he could get paid in TikTok content, but that's not going to be a guy anywhere going to be close to the Eagles. Paris Campbell, with the obvious connection to Nick Sirianni, is a guy that I could be looking at. A guy that you can move around a little bit, that Quez Watkins role, basically what Quez Watkins was supposed to be. Paris Campbell as well has the athletic ability, does not really drop any passes. I think he has what? How many drops does he have? Let me check here. 3 drops and 85 targets. That's pretty good. He's a guy that if there were to invest in anything in the receiving room, I could see a guy like him. Other than that, it's not really looking great there on the wide receiver rankings there, the wide receiver market. Trent Sherfield of Miami, okay rotational receiver. We saw how like him in a rotational role with the Dolphins, where you had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So you know what you're getting with him. Not going to be paying too much money as well. And of course, to round it off here, going back to the to the offensive line, Jason Kelsey. The gut feeling, he's coming back. And it's just going to be a matter of whether he wants to come back. I think we're going to get the announcement next week when he's going to be on the podcast with Howard Roseman. I think we're going to get official word on whether or not he's going to be back or not. So yeah, that was a little bit of a different episode here, kind of going through free agency primer. Not too much video breakdown here. I think we should go through also the like draft position wise moving forward here before we get to the draft as well. But stay tuned on channel here. I'll be dropping a few videos here. I'll take a little bit longer videos and kind of make them into like a podcast kind of form here. Maybe we should make a podcast. I don't know. We'll see. But stay tuned on the Twitter with all the free agency news that's going to be breaking. See you soon.